Commanders at boot camp say this is still officially a test, but for now, very few changes were required for this first class as these new recruits, men and women, embark on the 13 weeks it takes to become a U.S. Marine. For NPR News, I'm Steve Walsh in San Diego.
Where we go a little deeper on a big story in the news to help you make sense of the day. Listen to Consider This from NPR, and you're listening to All Things Considered.
Halima Aden was the first supermodel to wear a hijab on magazine covers and on the runway. Now she says, I'm not a cover girl.
I'm not a cover girl. I am Halima from Kakuma. I want to be the reason why girls have confidence within themselves, not the reason for their insecurity.
Why a supermodel is walking away on the next morning edition from NPR News.
That's this morning from 5 to 9 a.m. here on 91.5 WBEZ.
Thanks for joining us here at WBEZ, or Chicago's NPR news station. I'm Nava Lara. Still to come, we'll hear about one city's efforts to defund the police and how that's going. A new chance to sign up for health insurance, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announces an outside investigation of facts and causes related to last month's attack on the U.S. Capitol. Stay with WBEZ tonight to see what's changing in the news. Widespread snow for us increasing later this evening. You can expect the heaviest snow to be southeast of I-55, including in the Chicago area. Another cold evening. We'll see wind chills well below zero tonight. It's 15 with snow now in Calumet City. It's 17 in Lakeview. We have 17 degrees with heavy snow at Mobile Airport. Traffic volume dropping a bit, but the weather continues to make the commute pretty miserable. The evenings is jam inbound from Peterson to Montrose, outbound from the junction to Dempster. Inbound Kennedy is heavy before Cumberland all the way to downtown. Outbound's coming from Ohio to Cumberland. That's traffic on WBEZ.
WBEZ is supported by Napleton's Palatine Subaru, featuring a brand new facility with a Subaru Express Service Center, including car washes and a wide range of new and pre-owned Subarus. More information at palatinesubaru.com.
WBEZ is supported by Chase, working to help Chicagoans buy homes with their home buyer grant program. Learn more at a local Chase branch or at chase.com/Chicago. JP Morgan Chase Bank NA is an equal housing lender.
From this station. And from iDrive, providing cloud backup, full system backup, and on-site iDrive appliance to protect PCs, Macs, and servers from data loss due to crashes and ransomware. At iDrive.com/NPR. From LifeLock, reminding consumers that more than 30% of identity theft victims suffered multiple types of identity theft. Learn more at lifelock.com/NPR. And from the listeners who support this NPR station.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Elsa Chan. The recent drama over the stock of GameStop was driven by a flood of small investors taking aim at big money short sellers. Short sellers have long been cast as the villains of Wall Street since they make money when stock prices fall. NPR's Ryan Kylop has more.
First off, we're not going to explain how shorting a stock works right now. Suffice it to say, most investors win when stocks go up, and short sellers win when they go down. It's a practice as old as stocks themselves. The very first stock ever created was soon shorted, the Dutch East India Company back in the early 1600s. 300 years and a bunch of stocks later, President Herbert Hoover was railing against short sellers after the crash in 1929. There's no recording of the speech, so here's Craig Wright from the Hoover Library.
Small groups in the business world purpose to profit from depreciation of securities and commodities. They are equally condemned by our public and business opinion. They are by no means helpful to the nation.
In 1987, short sellers were blamed for their possible role in the Black Monday crash. In 2008, there was a brief ban on short selling, which officials later regretted. Eventually, a short seller was the villain in the Bond film Casino Royale.
I have the money, so short another million shares.
Sir, you must know you're betting against the market. No one expects this stock to go anywhere.
Just do it.
Spoiler alert, the Bond villain loses his money. Nobody likes to see a short seller win.
Well, if everybody's losing money and there's somebody at that time making a lot of money, it's going to be natural to feel a little bit of resentment towards them.
Edwin Dorsey is a short seller who writes a newsletter called The Bear Cave, and he says haters tend to miss the important role that short sellers can play. Sure, they might profit when stocks go down, but often the stocks deserve to, because the company is overvalued. And short sellers have played an important watchdog role, researching and exposing frauds like Enron, for example.
The early people there blowing the whistle and exposing wrongdoing and changing the sentiment were short sellers.
Dorsey made his name in shorts research while still in college. A friend was getting babysitting gigs on the website care.com, and she said something about it was off. Babysitters weren't being vetted properly, there were scammers about. Dorsey looked into it.
And I saw this company had been sued by a lot of parents whose kids had been harmed by babysitters on this platform, specifically babysitters that had not been vetted properly.
He dug up local news reports of similar issues and hundreds of consumer complaints. Finally, he decided to test the system. Dorsey filled out a babysitter profile using the name and photograph of Harvey Weinstein, the Hollywood sexual predator. He plugged in a fake social security number and a fake Facebook profile.
And I thought, okay, there's no way I'm going to be approved. And to my amazement, not only was I approved as Harvey Weinstein, I was elevated to their care force, which is like their highest level of authenticity.
Dorsey wrote up a long report that went viral on the short seller, sent it to journalists. 9 months later, the Wall Street Journal did a front-page story on the claims. And not long after that, the CEO, CFO, and general counsel all resigned. Care.com has since been purchased by another company and made significant safety changes. They defined the content for this story.
This is a great example of somebody finding something wrong, being motivated partly by money. I was betting against the stocks. I wanted to show people this bad, but also being motivated by saying, hey, here's this huge problem that people aren't paying attention to, and putting out a report that ended up making a difference.
Dorsey recognizes there are bad actors in the shorts world, people who exaggerate problems with company in order to turn a quick buck. But those are outweighed for him by the good actors who can expose wrongdoing. He doesn't mind playing the villain for pointing out flaws, he says. He'll take his compensation in dollars. Ryan Kylop, NPR News, New York.
Bundled up in thick winter coats and protective face coverings, people from around the country lined up today around the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. They came for the public viewing of actress Cicely Tyson. She died in late January at age 96. Her pioneering career had special resonance for some fellow black women, and we asked a few to tell us who Cicely Tyson was to them.
My name is Fakem Ero. I'm 28 years old. Live in Lagos, Nigeria. Watching a story about a black woman was always, you paid extra attention and you captured every word, and your eyes would dart as theirs would dart because you're studying every single move, because your soul recognizes that it's looking at its own, if you know what I mean. Because I'm mahogany dark, I'm super dark skinned, and I didn't always see my skin color anywhere. There's never any books, magazines, movies.
My name is Sharon Tyree. I'm 55 years old, and I live in Beltsville, Maryland.
My name is Nicole McCrae. I'm 31 years old, and I live in Beltsville, Maryland.
I've seen old pictures of Cicely Tyson, and let me tell you, she gives it all, okay? In her photo shoots, grace, dignity, confidence, it grabs you. You know, it makes you pay attention. Like, it just melts through the screen. You feel her in all her roles.
So my full name is Carolyn Ash, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I actually was in New York City in 2013, and I saw Cicely Tyson in The Trip to Bountiful on Broadway. And as I was watching her, I thought, I just cannot believe that this woman is giving this kind of performance at the age of 88.
My mother's 82, she'll be 83 in April. And she said, you know, I remember when we took a church bus trip up to New York to see Cicely Tyson in Bounty. She was in those struggle movies as, you know what, no matter what you put on me, I'm going to make sure that I keep pushing and keep moving until I get through this.
Yeah. Perseverance. I mean, I think that's just part of the DNA of a black woman, right?
She loved out loud, and she loved with a huge beating heart, and everyone that was lucky enough to work with her, to be around her. You know, felt that love of a grandmother, of an auntie, of a big sister, of a mother. I mean, and we felt that when we were here.
That's the one thing I'm going to miss. Like seeing an older person saying, I got you, you can do this, you are worth it, keep doing what you're doing, you're strong, right? The fact that I'm talking like this, and you would think she was my auntie from down the street, low key, but it really felt like that. It felt like that for us.
To me, it was like she was royalty, but then also accessible. And you usually don't get those two things in one person, but without even knowing her personally, I felt like I was one of her children, or grandchildren, or godchildren. That's what I'm holding in my heart, that I belong to her, and somehow she belonged to me.
That's Carolyn Ash, Sharon Tyree, Nicole McRae, and Faye Ballou, remembering the late, great actress Cicely Tyson. Her public viewing was today in New York, and her memorial service is tomorrow. You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
The pandemic has left many struggling to connect with friends. I'm Tasha Ann Simons. Join me on February 23rd for a virtual event all about navigating friendships during the pandemic. To register, visit wbez.org/events.
WBEZ is supported by Goose Island, announcing the reopening of both of their local locations, the Goose Island Tap Room and the Clybourne Brew House, for limited indoor and heated outdoor seating. Details at gooseisland.com/locations.
WBEZ is supported by Chase, working to help Chicagoans buy homes with their home buyer grant program. Learn more at a local Chase branch or at chase.com/Chicago. JP Morgan Chase Bank NA is an equal housing lender.
A snowy night ahead for us with acute conditions varying pretty widely. Could get an inch in the far west and northwest suburbs to around a foot if you're in the city of Chicago into northwest Indiana near the lakefront. The snow will be heavy at times tonight, a low of 5. Tomorrow high of 18 with more lake effect snow showers in the morning. Traffic-wise, Kennedy is heavy inbound off the tollway into downtown. Outbound jam from Ohio into Cumberland. Stevenson's a mess in both directions between the Dan Ryan and Hunt Road. Speeds are reduced all along Lakeshore Drive due to the snow. The traffic volume is light. In Chicago South Loop, there's a car crash into a building in Taylor and the Squans. It's 15 degrees now in Hammond. It's 17 in Uptown. We have 17 degrees in Grove Park. It's 5:30. This is 91.5 FM.
Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Herbst. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is calling on Congress to establish an independent commission to look into the deadly insurrection at the U.S. Capitol last month. Pelosi says the 9/11-style commission would investigate the facts and the causes of the attack. President Biden is expected to make a national push for his nearly $2 trillion coronavirus relief bill during a town hall tomorrow. Because Windsor Johnstown reports the administration is increasing the pressure on Congress to pass the next round of funding. Congressional Democrats are in the midst of ironing out the details of the next measure, which includes up to $1,400 in direct payments, an extension of extra weekly unemployment benefits, and more money for vaccine distribution.
said this is about job security. At least 32% of the workforce was cut because of the pandemic. Claudia Morel, WBEZ News.
Chicago is being considered as a possible site for a new mural campaign to raise awareness about deported veterans. WBEZ's Maria Inez Zamudio reports.
The Leave No One Behind mural project will feature about 30 deported veterans in cities across the country. More than 250 military veterans faced deportation between 2013 and 2018. The project is part of a coalition of activists and academics urging President Joe Biden to support legislation allowing deported veterans to return to the U.S. Jennifer Martinez Medina is with Repatriate
podcast, The Indicator.
To hear the backstory of this particular emoji, I called up Eric Grenier, who heads up social media for the Ford Motor Company. So where did this whole truck emoji idea begin?
We had been doing some work with Dwayne Johnson, you know, The Rock.
Oh, I know The Rock.
He had put out an Instagram post that said something, blah, 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 insert non-existent pickup truck emoji here. And we started thinking to ourselves, there's got to be a pickup emoji.
But The Rock was not wrong. And his posts got enough people hot and bothered that Grenier just couldn't ignore it. Would it be fair to say The Rock put you guys in kind of a hard place?
I guess The Rock did put us in a hard place, yes.
So Grenier hired an ad agency to figure out how to make that twinkle in The Rock's eye into a reality. And he thought that if the emoji could look like a Ford F-150, that would be its own form of ambient advertising. The agency got to work drafting a formal proposal for the mysterious organization vested with the power to decide which emoji ideas live and which ones die.
One of our truck leads calls it the Emoji Illuminati.
Its technical name, the Unicode Consortium, a Silicon Valley nonprofit which administers the library of emoji. So is there an official policy about how money is supposed to influence or not influence the approval of emoji?
Nothing specific about money at this point. It does have money-adjacent issues. For example, there are no emoji for celebrities, deities, logos, or brands.
Jennifer H. Lee is a member of Unicode's emoji subcommittee, which vets proposals before they go to the final vote. And she says, at least in theory, the emoji proposal process is supposed to be meritocratic. They accept proposals from everyday people and give priority to ideas that demonstrate global demand. And Lee says when the pickup proposal reached the Emoji Illuminati, it looked like it was coming from an everyday truck lover.
I remember being really struck by the quality and the statistics. It was just like a random guy, you know, some guy that just sort of like emailed in this proposal and like realized he was and a pickup trucks. Like, who knows?
And no one really did know until
July 17th of 2019. We announced to the world that we were behind the truck emoji.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for, the truck emoji.
You can't put a price on it because it's free.
Did you feel like Unicode had been kind of tricked by Big Truck?
There were no rules in place about disclosure. It was the first one that really raised the issue of whether or not there should be disclosure about dark money behind emoji.
Now, Jennifer Lee says plenty of emojis have had corporate backing. From the taco emoji, lobbied for by Taco Bell, to the interracial couple emoji, that's the Tinder joint. But Lee says the way Ford subcontracted their proposal to a seeming truck lover without any clear link to the company has led her and others to call for more disclosure of corporate money in emoji. Eric Grenier at Ford says the company did not intentionally obscure their role in gestating the pickup emoji. They simply didn't want to publicize it until it was a done deal. At the time of publication, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has still not responded to multiple requests for comment. But if you do hear this, Mr. Rock, we are more than open to a follow-up. Alexi Horowitz-Ghazi, NPR News.
Support for Planet Money comes from Merrill. Merrill Edge Self-Directed Investing has tools to help clients find answers to questions. More at merrilledge.com/withinreach. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News. Calls to defund police departments picked up steam last year after a series of controversial police killings. Many wondered if local governments diverting money from police departments and spent it on other services like housing and mental health, would that be a better way to serve residents in need? Well, that's what leaders in Austin, Texas decided to do when they reduced the police budget by almost a third, one of the biggest funding cuts in the country. Audrey McGlinchey of member station KUT has been looking into how it's been going.
Last October, 42 police officers graduated from the city's police academy.
My name is Vanessa Swesnick, and today is my first day as an officer with the Austin Police Department.
And while this was Swesnick's first day, it was also the last police graduation for a while. 2 months earlier, the city council voted on a new budget for the department, one that eliminated $13 million for a year's worth of the hiring and training of new officers. Swesnick, a former teacher in her 30s, noted some of the controversy around this decision.
I know that the city council wants what's best for the city, and so do we. So I'm hopeful that even if people disagree on how to get there, I'm hopeful that we can keep that in mind, that we all want what's best for the city.
Last May, protests erupted across the country after a Minneapolis police officer killed George Floyd, a black man. Thousands gathered in the streets of Austin. At City Hall, leaders just happened to be voting on a new budget, so calls into their meetings sounded like these.
I'm calling today to demand that the Austin City Council approve a budget that defunds the police department by $100 million.
We demand you reinvest these funds into healthcare, EMS, education, housing, mental health, and drug addiction resources.
Ultimately, the city reduced the police budget by about $150 million. But that number's not all it seems to be. About a tenth of that money comes from canceling police training classes and reducing overtime spending. That money went to other departments, like the Public Health Agency. But more than half of the cuts were just a reshuffling. For example, the city moved its forensics lab away from the police. Same department, different oversight. The next day, Austin Mayor Steve Adler called the vote transformative. He said the city could better focus on funding services to prevent crime rather than respond to it.
This is a budget that really asks the question, how much safer can we be?
Police Chief Brian Manley was not entirely sold. He worried with fewer new officers, police would be slower to respond to 911 calls. So to keep this from happening, he moved officers off special assignments and onto patrol. While he was critical, Manley welcomed the chance to reconsider the role of police, especially when it comes to things like mental health.
Oftentimes, police officers are sent to situations for which we're not always the best trained or the best equipped. We're just simply the only ones available.
Reallocating some of this police money will take time. Last month, the city spent part of it to operate a hotel that will help people make the transition out of homelessness. Advocates say this is one example of spending police money on something that could reduce the need for law enforcement. But it's unclear if Austin's decision to cut its police budget could ever happen again. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has promised to sign a bill making it almost impossible for cities to reduce their police department budgets. For NPR News, I'm Audrey McGlinchey in Austin.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News.
Thanks for joining us here at WBEZ. We're Chicago's NPR news station. Coming up, we're watching the winter weather, and the state attorney general is closing his criminal investigation into a deadly Legionnaire's disease outbreak at a downstate veterans home. Keep with 91.5 as you start your week and as you listen throughout the evening. The good news is it's getting a little better on the roads, but the weather is getting a little worse. The inbound Eisenhower solid from Wolf into downtown. Outbound traffic is barely moving from Western to Manheim. Edens is getting bad again. It's now jammed from Lake Avenue to Montrose. Outbound's heavy off to Kennedy to Willow. Kennedy's packed both ways between downtown and Cumberland. It's well over an hour either way between O'Hare and downtown. Weather-wise for us tonight's a good night to stay home. We're on our way to a low tonight around 8 with snow heavy at times, especially near the lakefront where another 6 to 10 inches accumulation is possible. Tomorrow, snow before noon, a high around 20. You're listening to WBEZ.
WBEZ is supported by BMO Harris Bank. The BMO for Black and Latinx Businesses Empowering Small Business program offers additional access to funds, educational resources, and networking. More at bmoharris.com/Black and Latinx. WBEZ is supported by Napleton's Palatine Subaru, featuring a brand new facility with a Subaru Express Service Center, including car washes and a wide range of new and pre-owned Subarus. More information at palatinesubaru.com. The Chicago Public Media Sounding Board is holding a meeting on Thursday, February 25th at 6 p.m. All Sounding Board meetings are open to the public, and this meeting will be held via Zoom. Meeting information at wbez.org.
Come back tomorrow for Morning Edition on WBEZ. Who benefits if you cancel $10,000 in student loan debt versus if you cancel $50,000 in student loan debt? Listen for that tomorrow on Morning Edition here on 91.5 FM.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Elsa Chang. Thunder, sleet, single-digit temperatures in Texas, record-setting deep freezes. Much of the country is witnessing some bizarre and historic winter weather. But why? Well, it has to do in part with something called the polar vortex, a mass of cold air spinning over the Arctic and up into the stratosphere. It strengthens in the fall and normally stays stable over the North Pole, keeping cold air penned in over the Arctic. Dr. Michael Ventris, a meteorological scientist at IBM, explains it like this.
The polar vortex wants to sit over the North Pole. It feels like it's comfortable there. That's equilibrium.
However,
it can make weather very interesting when the polar vortex up in the stratosphere gets disrupted.
He says that's what happened last month when temperatures at high altitudes above the North Pole spiked. Ventris and other meteorologists were fascinated by that unusually intense sudden stratospheric warming event, as it's called, and by what might happen as cold air got pushed south into North America and Europe by an erratic jet stream.
We can actually see locking or high pressure setting up over the North Pole, essentially anomalous warmth over the Arctic region, and that's because all the Arctic air is getting squeezed out of the North Pole and it's getting pushed down into the mid-latitudes where we live.
But figuring out exactly how that push of cold air translates into regional winter storms is a challenge.
Essentially, the only type of predictability we have at this point is understanding these windows of opportunity out in the future, where there's going to be more cold air coming from the polar north, but we're not sure exactly how that cold air mass is going to, come down across the North Atlantic, which kind of makes these predictions of snowstorms at that synoptic level a bit more difficult.
He said one of the most stunning impacts he's seen was single-digit temperatures in Texas.
It's just one of the most remarkable things I've seen in my lifetime, and I'm not sure if I'll ever see it again.
Although he did point out that meteorologists aren't perfect at predicting the future. Kayhan Kalhor is a master classical musician from Iran. He first came to the U.S. decades ago and launched a successful career working with names as big as the New York Philharmonic. His life back home in Iran has been marked by tragedy and a repressive regime, and so he and his wife decided they would try to move permanently to the U.S. But about 4 years ago, they began having a series of troubling encounters with U.S. immigration officials. NPR's Anastasia Siukis reports.
There was nothing easy about Kayhan Kalhor's life in Iran. The first time he left the country to flee the revolution, he was just 17 and alone.
The revolution carried many different manifestations that I, at least in my family, wasn't used to. How to be more religious, how to be more political, how to be more whatever you're not.
Kalhor walked more than 2,500 miles to Italy. All he had was a small backpack and his kamancha, a bowed string instrument that's traditional in Persian classical music. Not long after he left home, Kalhor lost even more. During a brutal 8-year war between Iran and Iraq in the 1980s, a missile hit the family home, and both of Kalhor's parents and his brother were killed. music sustained him. He studied Western classical music in Italy and in Canada, but he knew he wanted to bring his own music, Persian classical music, to wider audiences. He moved to New York City, and in 2000 he was invited by the celebrated cellist Yo-Yo Ma to become part of a new collective of international musicians, the Silk Road Ensemble.
I think he's one of the great musicians I've ever had the privilege to know and to work with.
Kalhor was touring the world. He'd already gotten Canadian citizenship, but he thought of the U.S. as home. He'd received a series of temporary visas, and then September 11th happened.
And that was a period that I didn't feel safe.
So, despite everything that had happened to him and his family in Iran, he decided to return. Not long after, he met a woman named Zohra Sultanabadi. They fell in love. In a documentary film about the Silk Road Ensemble called The Music of Strangers, Kalhor and Sultanabadi confidently declared that their lives were now settled in Tehran. Their future was there. This was in May 2009. It was a time of hope for them and for their country. But just 1 month later, the Iranian government violently cracked down on the country's Green Movement, which challenged the presidential election results. Kalhor felt it was time to leave his native country again.
The situation, especially for musicians, for the artists, and for the intellectuals, became very difficult because the administration was not cultured. And this is what I have to offer, culture.
So Kalhor found a home for the couple in California, and he got a green card. Speaking from Iran, Sultanabadi says that her hopes for living in the United States were simple.
Mostly, I just wanted to be with Kayhan and live with him.
She applied for her own green card and secured an interview with U.S. immigration in Turkey, since there's no American diplomatic presence in Iran. Sultanabadi says that the interviewer went way beyond the normal lines of questioning to make sure there's a real relationship at stake, a requirement for a spouse applying for a green card.
She said to me, "Your family probably doesn't even like him." I said, "Well, you're wrong. In Iran, everybody likes Kayhan, and my family loves him." She told me, "That's nice that your husband is a successful artist, but I'm not interested."
She was turned down. Then came an email from the Immigration Visa Unit from the U.S. Embassy in Ankara, Turkey, that seemed to threaten to revoke Kalhor's own green card. All of a sudden, he had to worry about being prevented from entering the country or that he would be detained by immigration officials once he landed. After NPR